It started with a faint flicker, then total darkness. My phone screen went blank while I was replying to a message, and just like that, my entire digital universe vanished. No warning, no goodbye. Just silence. I stared at the lifeless device as if willing it back to life would work. But it didn't. My first thought wasn't panic, it was denial. Surely it would restart. It had to. After a few failed attempts and one long sigh, reality hit me. I was about to face an entire day without the one device that held my calendar, communication, entertainment, and even my sense of identity. I hadn't even stepped out of bed, yet I already felt lost. I reached for my phone by habit at least 4 times in the first 10 minutes. It was like trying to breathe underwater. You don't realize how much your phone mediates your day until it's gone. It's not just the device, it's the rhythm it gives your life. I remembered a phrase from a productivity seminar I once attended: if you want to reset your mind, cut off your noise. Back then, I'd nodded along without truly understanding. Today, I was forced into that silence, and it felt like stepping into a forgotten world. My mornings usually begin with a barrage of alerts: work emails, news updates, inspirational quotes from an app one barely remember downloading. But that morning, my only wake-up call was sunlight through the window and birdsong I'd never noticed before. It was beautiful. And also, unsettling. Without my phone, I had to rely on the wall clock. I brushed my teeth in silence. I ate breakfast without scrolling. For the first time in years, I tasted my food instead of skimming through content while chewing. It was oddly intimate, me in the moment, uninterrupted. I walked into work half expecting a crisis, imagining my team spiraling without my instant responses. But surprisingly, things were calm. A colleague greeted me, "You okay?" "You didn't reply to the group chat." I explained, and they nodded with amused empathy. "Good luck," they smirked. I had to adjust. No quick calendar checks, no reminders. I jotted meeting times on sticky notes and scribbled action points in a notebook. I felt like I'd traveled back in time. But here's the thing, I was more present. I looked people in the eyes instead of multitasking. And they noticed. Lunchtime was the real test. Normally, I'd scroll through social media, maybe squeeze in a YouTube video or two. But today, I sat at the table with just me and my colleagues. Someone started a story, and another picked it up. Without screens between us, the conversation flowed like water. I shared a memory about a university prank that had everyone laughing. It had been years since I told that story, and I wouldn't have remembered it if I'd been buried in my feed. Strangely, I felt lighter. Human connection, I realized, is richer when we're not half present through a screen. Without digital reminders, I dusted off my old leather notepad, the one I used back in university when I was still mastering public administration. It felt almost ceremonial flipping open its pages. The smell of paper and ink brought back the days when ideas felt more permanent. I began to list my tasks by hand, crossing each one off as I completed it. There was something oddly satisfying in the scratch of a pen against paper. I felt organized in a different way, not managed by apps, but in control of my own rhythm. It was slow, yes, but intentional. Around 2 p.m., I realized I had no way to contact a partner for an afternoon meeting. My contacts, all stored on my phone, were inaccessible. For a brief moment, panic crept in. I was used to efficiency, and this felt like stumbling in the dark. Then I remembered, I had once written her number on a sticky note during a particularly chaotic week. I rummaged through my drawer and found it. That simple slip of paper saved me. It reminded me how vital it is to have backups, not just digital ones, but old-school, tactile ones too. Normally, my commute is filled with music or podcasts. But that evening, I walked home in complete silence. The first few blocks felt empty. Then I began to notice things. A mural I'd never really seen before. The way the trees swayed. The laughter of school kids spilling onto the sidewalk. With each step, I felt more alive. More aware. I wasn't walking through the city, I was part of it. It was like switching from watching a video to actually being in the room. It was quiet, yes, but deeply immersive. Presence, I was learning, is its own reward. At home, dinner was different. No background music. No scrolling. Just conversation. My younger sibling joked, "Who are you and what have you done with my distracted brother?" I laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I listened fully, not just waiting for my turn to speak. We talked about school, politics, dreams. It reminded me of when we were kids, before the phone became a family member. I found myself asking more questions, and they answered with more detail. Without screens pulling us away, we found something we'd let slip, each other. Evening usually means diving into notifications, late-night emails, and endless scrolling. But with no phone, I reached for a book instead, one I'd started months ago but never finished. As I read, I noticed my eyes didn't feel strained. My mind wasn't overstimulated. I slept earlier than usual. The kind of sleep that doesn't just rest the body, but the soul. No buzzing, no late pings. Just deep, uninterrupted rest. That night, I dreamt, not of screens or alerts, but of a wide-open sky and a quiet place beneath it. Peace had found me in the stillness. I woke up without an alarm, yet felt more rested than I had in weeks. No urgent buzz. No blinding screen in my face. Just natural light and the sound of distant roosters, a sound I'd somehow forgotten still existed in Kigali's quieter neighborhoods. Stretching out of bed, I realized my mind was clearer. Normally, I'd dive into a sea of notifications before even brushing my teeth. But now, I stood still for a moment. Present. Breathing. I was beginning to understand what it meant to wake up, not just get up. Without the pull of TikTok or email refreshes, I found myself with an extra hour before leaving for work. At first, I paced the house, unsure of what to do. Then I spotted my neglected journal on the shelf, its pages untouched for months. I opened it and began to write. Not for anyone, not for likes, just for me. Thoughts flowed freely, fears, joys, half-finished dreams. I was reconnecting with my inner voice, the one often silenced by the constant noise of the digital world. That hour became one of the most valuable gifts of the day. At work, I bumped into a colleague I'd often exchanged only quick messages with. "No phone today?" she asked. "Long story," I replied. We ended up having coffee together. No rush. No interruptions. Just genuine dialogue. She shared her struggles balancing work and family. I opened up about the pressures of always being available. We realized how little we really knew each other, despite working together for years. In the absence of screens, we'd rediscovered something precious, human depth. The kind that requires time, eye contact, and space to breathe. Later that day, while waiting for the bus, I looked up and saw a familiar face. It was David, a university friend I hadn't seen in years. Normally, I'd be glued to my screen, missing moments like these. But this time, we locked eyes and smiled instantly. We talked the entire ride, reminiscing about campus days in Zanzibar, laughing over lectures we once feared, and catching up on life's twists. "Let's meet again," he said as he got off. "Without phones," I added. We both laughed. The connection felt real. It had nothing to do with Wi-Fi. That evening, I sat on the balcony, watching the sunset melt into Lake Muhaza's silhouette in the distance. No music. No screen. Just silence. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Like the world was speaking in a softer voice I'd never bothered to hear. I thought about how often I'd filled every quiet moment with noise. But maybe it's in those gaps, between the chaos and the notifications, that clarity lives. That evening, I didn't miss my phone. I was beginning to miss myself less. Without digital reminders, I completely forgot to buy groceries. At first, I panicked. But then I made a handwritten list, just like Mum used to do before smartphones. I walked to the local market instead of calling for delivery. At the market, I actually talked to the vendors. Asked about prices. Bargained. One woman said, "We miss people like you, those who talk." Her words stayed with me. We've automated so much of life that we've forgotten the joy of simple human exchange. There was a kind of slowness I hadn't felt in years. Not laziness, but an unhurried pace where every action had its own rhythm. I brewed tea, not just made it. I folded laundry with both hands, not one, while the other scrolled. And for the first time, I noticed how my body responded to this slower rhythm. My heartbeat steadied, my back relaxed, my shoulders weren't tensed in anticipation of another ping. Slowness, I realized, wasn't a flaw. It was healing. Back at work, I faced a meeting I'd been dreading. Usually, I'd use my phone as a crutch, checking it during awkward silences, using it to look busy. But now, I had nothing to shield me. So I leaned in. I listened more, contributed directly, and maintained real eye contact. To my surprise, the meeting flowed better. Without distractions, I was sharper, more articulate. One supervisor even complimented my clarity. Maybe we dilute our own value by never being fully present. At the bank, the queue was long. My first instinct was to check my phone and kill time. But I had no device. So I waited. Just waited. Watched people. Observed facial expressions. Listened to an old man's story about how things worked in the 80s. By the time my number was called, I had learned something new about Rwanda's early banking days. That kind of learning doesn't come from Google, it comes from presence. From listening with both ears and not one thumb on a touchscreen. In the quiet of that evening, I opened my drawer and pulled out my sketchbook. It had been years. I used to draw in university, between assignments, to clear my mind. But somehow, my phone had taken that space. I drew for an hour. Then another. My lines were rusty, but my soul felt steady. I wasn't performing or posting, I was creating for the sake of it. That kind of joy can't be double-tapped. It can only be felt. I decided to cook something new, but with no YouTube or Pinterest to guide me, I relied on memory and instinct. I remembered how my grandmother used to cook, no measurements, just taste and patience. The meal didn't turn out perfect, but it tasted like something real. Something made with attention, not automation. I sat down to eat, without distraction, and tasted every spice. It wasn't about food, it was about presence. And presence tastes better than any digital dish. My neighbor knocked. Someone's trying to reach you. They called my phone. It was my boss checking in on a report. Embarrassed, I quickly jotted down what was needed and thanked her. Later, she said, "Funny how we used to survive without being this reachable." I smiled. There was truth in that. The world didn't collapse because I was offline. And maybe, just maybe, we make ourselves too available and call it responsibility. Sometime in the afternoon, the urge returned. I reached for my phone instinctively, even though it was still dead. Muscle memory. A reminder of how deeply wired this habit had become. It scared me a little, this reflex. It wasn't about necessity anymore. It was dependency. Like my hand wasn't fully my own anymore. That realization alone made the absence feel important. This wasn't punishment, it was detox. Without headphones in my ears, I started to hear sounds I'd forgotten. Birds, yes, but also the laughter of children playing across the street, a neighbor's radio humming an old ballad, the quiet rustle of wind. Each sound felt like a note in a forgotten melody of life. One I'd been muting for years with digital noise. It made me wonder, what else have I been silencing in my pursuit of convenience? I saw a familiar face at the library. We used to study together, but I'd forgotten her name, though I still remembered her Instagram handle. We laughed about it, and she said, "We remember filters more than real smiles these days." That hit me hard. Since when had handles replaced humans? That day, we reintroduced ourselves. No screen. Just two people rebuilding a friendship in full resolution, no filters. By the end of the workday, something remarkable happened. I had fewer headaches. My thoughts weren't scattered. I wasn't overstimulated or racing to the next ping. My mind felt cleaner. I began to ask myself, was this mental clarity worth the trade? Was it possible that my phone, while helpful, had also been constantly fragmenting my attention? It was a hard truth, but I was ready to face it. In the evening, I felt bored. Honest, plain boredom. Not the kind disguised by mindless scrolling, but the raw kind. It sat heavy on me at first. But then it passed, and from its ashes came curiosity. I rearranged my desk. Cleaned a drawer. Flipped through an old photo album. It wasn't thrilling, but it was real. Maybe boredom isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the birthplace of creativity we've all been ignoring. I walked to the neighborhood playground and simply watched. Kids inventing games with sticks and stones. Mothers chatting on benches. A young man is helping an old woman carry water. None of them were on their phones. It was like watching the world breathe without interruption. A quiet orchestra of life playing out in high definition, no buffering, no skipping. I felt like a visitor rediscovering a homeland I hadn't seen in years. At a bus terminal, I met an older gentleman reading a worn-out novel. "I see you're offline too," he joked. We laughed and talked for 20 minutes about politics, books, and Rwandan history. He said something I'll never forget. "Son, the problem isn't the phone. It's that we don't know how to be alone with our own thoughts anymore." That sentence echoed inside me long after we parted ways. That night, I lay in bed with my journal again. I wrote freely for pages. About the day. About the quiet. About the things I'd almost forgotten I loved. Then I paused, pen in hand, and asked myself one question. What would life look like with less phone and more presence? It didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like a shift. A choice. That night, I didn't miss the phone. I missed nothing. Because for the first time in a long time, I had been fully, beautifully here. In the past, I equated productivity with an empty inbox. But today, I had no inbox to check, no notifications to chase. And yet, I felt more accomplished. I had completed real tasks, not just digital ones. Ironically, by not checking emails every 5 minutes, I made room for what really mattered. I tackled overdue tasks, helped a colleague sort an urgent file, and even printed and filed physical documents like I used to in my early admin days. The day felt fuller. Realer. In the silence, questions bubbled up. Why does my colleague always wear blue? What are the names of the flowers outside our office? What's the history behind the sculpture in our lobby? Without Google at my fingertips, I began to ask people again. Real conversations sparked real knowledge. It reminded me of my university days, when learning meant inquiry, not just searching. Curiosity was slowly becoming part of me again. After work, I walked without purpose. No Maps app, no playlist. Just wandered. I let my feet guide me like they used to before smartphones told us the fastest route. I discovered a quiet coffee shop tucked between 2 old buildings. It smelled of roasted beans and pages. I stepped in, ordered tea, and just sat. No rush. No urge to document it. Just a moment for me. There was a strange freedom in knowing no one could call or text me. It was unsettling at first, like something vital was missing. But later, it felt like a shield. A soft wall between me and the world's constant demands. I remembered an HR seminar I attended where they talked about digital burnout. I hadn't understood it fully then. But now, in my disconnected state, I could feel the healing begin. Like silence washing over a noisy mind. Time moved differently that day. Slower, yes, but also deeper. Every minute held more than just data. It held presence. I wasn't multitasking. I was monotasking, giving each moment my full self. Instead of jumping from notification to notification, I flowed from one activity to the next. I could finally hear myself think. And that voice, the one I usually drown out, had things to say. There was a moment during the day when I imagined what I would have posted if I still had my phone. A photo of the sunset. A quick thought on peace. But then I asked myself, why do I feel the need to share everything? Was it about connection or validation? The realization stung. I wasn't missing sharing, I was missing being. And being, it turns out, is enough. I caught myself holding my hands awkwardly, unsure what to do with them. Normally, one would be clutching my phone, scrolling, typing, tapping. Now they were free to hold a book, write a letter, make tea. I even practiced breathing exercises I learned in a public speaking class years ago. With nothing to grip, my hands became extensions of my presence. There's a background noise that comes with phone use. Digital chatter, constant alerts, vibrations, and rings. I didn't realize how much it drowned out my thoughts until it was gone. The silence wasn't scary. It was sacred. Like hearing the world exhale. Like meeting your own mind after years of shouting over it. I had to recall a friend's birthday, without Facebook. I sat down and thought hard, flipping through mental photos, linking dates with events. It took time, but I remembered. And it felt like reclaiming a part of my brain I'd outsourced to a machine. My memory, rusty as it was, still worked. It just needed space to stretch. I reorganized my bookshelf. Cleaned my workspace. Fixed a drawer that had been stuck for weeks. I did things that never made it to my to-do list because they didn't feel urgent, but they were important. Without the constant buzz of online urgency, I finally paid attention to what was quietly waiting for me. My surroundings began to reflect the clarity growing inside me. That night, I dreamt vividly. About my childhood home. About a project I'd put on hold. My sleep had gone deeper. Maybe it was the lack of blue light. Maybe it was the lack of anxiety. But I woke up with a notebook full of scribbled ideas. My subconscious had space to speak again. Without digital interruptions, the mind wanders in the best ways. I realized I hadn't compared myself to anyone all day. No photos of perfect vacations. No filtered faces. No career updates that trigger self-doubt. Just me, in my lane. It felt like stepping off a racetrack and into a garden. I wasn't running, I was growing. Slowly, yes. But on my own terms. A bird landed on my windowsill in the morning. Bright yellow. Chirping happily. Normally, I'd scramble for my phone. But this time, I just watched. No camera. No post. Just presence. It left after a minute, and I smiled. Not every beautiful thing needs proof. Sometimes, the memory is enough. I wrote a letter to a friend. Not a message. A real letter, pen on paper, stamped, sealed. It felt personal, intentional, human. I told her about my phoneless day and how it changed me. It wasn't just communication, it was connection. The kind you can hold in your hands. Without my phone as a shield, I became more approachable. People talked to me more. A cleaner at work told me about his daughter's graduation. A stranger in line offered restaurant recommendations. Phones often signal I'm busy. Without one, I was open. And in that openness, I found kindness everywhere. I cleaned my small apartment with full attention. Each sweep of the broom, each wiped surface, it became a form of meditation. Cleaning wasn't just a chore. It was a reset. A ritual. Without music or podcasts to distract me, I became mindful of the spaces I live in, and how they reflect the state of my mind. At lunch, a friend joined me. We sat in silence for long stretches. Normally, we'd fill those gaps with scrolling or showing memes. But this time, the silence wasn't awkward. It was restful. Friendship, I realized, doesn't always need words. Sometimes presence is the language. With no screen to entertain me, my mind began crafting stories again. Characters, dialogue, and plot twists. Ideas I hadn't explored since my university days surfaced effortlessly. It was as if creativity had been patiently waiting behind the noise. And now, in the quiet, it had room to breathe. I had to make a decision, sign a minor contract at work. Normally, I'd message 3 people for input. But today, I had to rely on my own judgment. I read it carefully, thought it through, and signed. And when it turned out well, I felt something I hadn't in a while, trust in myself. Throughout the day, I noticed a calm confidence growing. I didn't post, didn't share, didn't perform for an audience. And yet, I still mattered. I was still here. I wasn't in my profile. I wasn't my likes. I was enough, even in silence. Especially in silence. A child waved at me. I waved back, fully present. No screen stood between us. I cooked again, this time, experimenting. Creativity tasted like spice and warmth. I noticed my breathing. Slower. Deeper. Controlled. A coworker asked, "Why are you so calm today?" I didn't know what to say. Maybe because I was. I read a chapter of a book without checking my phone once. Uninterrupted immersion. I took a nap. No guilt. Just rest, without buzzing guilt trips. I journaled about my fears. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. A smile came more easily. Eye contact lasted longer. The sun set again. And again, I just watched. I asked myself quietly, do I really want my phone back tomorrow? I found myself staring at the charger. My phone was still off, untouched since yesterday. My hand reached toward it, but paused. I asked myself, do I want to go back to how it was? The silence around me had become familiar. Not comforting yet, but no longer threatening. I chose not to turn it on. Not yet. One more day without it might reveal something I hadn't seen yet. I took the long way to work. Streets I'd walked 1,000 times suddenly looked different. Shops I'd never noticed. Murals on old walls. A woman selling fresh bananas smiled at me and said, "First time seeing you walk slowly." That struck me. Had I really been moving through life that fast? Fast enough to miss the colors of my own street? I stopped, bought bananas, and walked on, slower this time. In a team meeting, I listened with more intention. Without glancing down every few minutes, I caught subtle things, tone shifts, eye movements, hesitation in voices. I was able to respond with empathy, not just efficiency. "You really listened," a colleague said after. I nodded. Listening had become more than a skill. It was becoming a habit. That afternoon, a student assistant came to me with a concern. Usually, I'd half listen while checking notifications or replying to an email. But now, I gave him my full attention. He talked. I listened. He left with a smile and said, "Thanks for really hearing me." And I realized something. Presence isn't just about being in the room, it's about being in the moment. There was freedom in knowing I didn't have to respond instantly to messages. No pressure to be available 24/7. It felt like reclaiming my time. I remembered something from my admin law class: silence is not absence. It's a space that can hold meaning. That stuck with me. Sometimes, a delayed response is better than a distracted one. I went to my usual coffee spot. No scrolling while sipping. No pretending to be busy. Just coffee, warm air, and the sound of spoons clinking against cups. I struck up a conversation with the barista. Learned her name was Chantal, and she dreamed of opening a pastry shop. No one ever asks, she smiled. They're all too busy with their phones. That moment lingered long after the cup was empty. I saw a group of school kids playing football in the rain. No coaches, no gear, just laughter and mud. I felt the urge to record it, to freeze the joy. But I didn't. I just watched. Let the image live in my memory instead of my gallery. And oddly enough, it felt more permanent that way. While cleaning, I found an old printed photo of me and my university classmates in Zanzibar. We were all laughing. No filters. Just real joy. I realized how long it had been since I'd printed a photo. Maybe I'd been too busy curating memories for others instead of collecting them for myself. Without calendar pop-ups and reminders, I had to trust my sense of time. And somehow, I didn't miss a thing. My internal clock was more capable than I thought. It made me wonder, had I outsourced not just my memory, but my confidence to technology? This was a step toward reclaiming it. I sat down with my journal and asked myself a hard question: who am I without my phone? The answers weren't immediate. But they came. I'm curious. I'm present. I'm capable. This disconnection had become a mirror. And what I saw wasn't perfect, but it was me. Real, raw, and enough. During my lunch break, I simply sat on the rooftop garden of our office. No feeds. No reels. Just clouds shifting, leaves rustling, the wind brushing past. I realized that my usual breaks weren't restful, they were just a different kind of consumption. This was rest. Undistracted. Undivided. I read a policy document. Not the most exciting task, but for once, I wasn't toggling between apps while doing it. I understood it better. I even caught an error others had missed. Deep focus had returned. The kind that doesn't just get tasks done, but gets them done well. I wasn't just faster, I was better. That afternoon, sunlight spilled through the window and hit my desk just right. Golden. Warm. Beautiful. Normally, I'd be too focused on emails to notice. But now, I paused. Let the light soak in. Took a deep breath. It felt like a quiet blessing I hadn't been paying attention to in years. A colleague asked, "Isn't it hard being without your phone?" I smiled. At first, yes. But now? Not really. The surprise in their eyes said everything. Disconnection wasn't a weakness. It was a strength I'd forgotten I had. Confidence doesn't always come from doing more, it sometimes comes from needing less. I reached for my pocket during a long pause at work, nothing was there. The reflex was still alive. But I laughed this time. Awareness had replaced anxiety. Each moment I caught myself was another step away from habit and closer to intention. Boredom returned, but I welcomed it this time. I watched ants move in a line on the windowsill. I scribbled down random ideas in my notebook. I even made a paper airplane and flew it. Childlike, maybe, but not wasteful. Boredom had become a playground, not a prison. I finally asked myself, when I turn the phone back on, what will change? I didn't know yet. But I knew I couldn't go back to everything. The quiet had taught me too much. I needed a plan, not just a return. That evening, I made a list, not of tasks, but of what matters. Family dinners. Undivided conversations. Long walks. Deep focus. Laughter not recorded. Stories not posted. The phone might return. But these things would stay. They had to. That night, I sat outside under the stars. No screen. Just me, the sky, and the weightlessness of disconnection. It didn't feel like I had lost anything. I had gained something richer. A connection not through Wi-Fi, but through awareness. Through being. As I reached for the charger the next morning, I stopped. My phone had been off for more than a day. And still, I was okay. Maybe I'd turn it on tomorrow. Or the day after. Or, maybe I'd use it differently from now on. The truth was, I no longer needed it the way I thought I did. And that realization was everything. I arrived at work earlier than usual, not because of reminders, but because of readiness. My mind was clear, my schedule handwritten, my focus undivided. Without distractions, I achieved more in 2 hours than I typically did in half a day. My team noticed the shift. "You seem lighter," someone said. And I was. Unburdened. During lunch, I shared what I'd learned with 2 colleagues. No slideshow, no videos. Just words. My story, in my voice. They listened, wide-eyed. One said, Maybe I'll try that this weekend. Another asked, what did you miss most? I paused. Nothing, I replied honestly. I didn't miss it, I found myself. Later that afternoon, I plugged in the phone. The screen lit up slowly, like a returning ghost. Hundreds of missed notifications. Messages. Missed calls. I didn't open anything right away. I just held the phone in my hand, not like a lifeline, but like an object. A tool. I had changed, even if it hadn't. The first message I opened was from my mother. Are you okay? Haven't heard from you. I called her instead of replying with a text. I'm fine, Mama, I said. I've just been really present. She laughed. You sound different. Better. And in that simple call, I realized how much more powerful a voice is than text. I deleted a few apps. Turned off unnecessary notifications. Moved all social media to a folder called Maybe Later. I no longer wanted every buzz to demand my attention. It wasn't about rejecting technology. It was about reclaiming authority over it. I wanted to use my phone, not serve it. That evening, I sat down with a pen and paper, not a productivity app, and wrote down my values. Family. Focus. Peace. Creativity. Health. None of them required Wi-Fi. This wasn't a rebellion. It was a return. A homecoming to what matters. I apologized to a friend. For all the times I only half listened. For the ahas I gave while scrolling. He said, I thought that was just how people are now. That hurt more than it should have. We promised each other more phone-free hangouts. More moments that lived in memory, not media. I returned to my sketchbook. This time, it wasn't therapy, it was joy. My lines were still imperfect, but they were mine. And I wasn't posting them. They were just for me. Creating without sharing had become sacred. My thoughts no longer needed applause to be valid. I sat in a quiet room for 20 minutes. No phone. No noise. Just me and my thoughts. It was uncomfortable at first. Then it became peaceful. Aloneness isn't loneliness. It's a kind of honesty we often run from. But now, I could sit with myself, and not flinch. I started noticing people who were always on their phones. The couple in the restaurant not speaking. The child was tugging at his mother's sleeve. The security guard is scrolling endlessly. I didn't judge. I just noticed. And I knew, I had been them. Maybe I still would be sometimes. But at least now I knew the cost. One evening, I heard a thought in my mind that I hadn't heard in years. It was my younger self, the dreamer, the writer, the one who imagined wild futures. He asked, are we still chasing that dream? I smiled and replied in silence, we are now. I played an old guitar that had gathered dust in my room. My fingers were clumsy, but my heart remembered the chords. Music filled the space once held by screens. And it felt more real than any playlist. I didn't throw my phone away. I used it when needed. A map for directions. A message to a friend. But when it wasn't needed, it stayed away. Balance wasn't about abstinence, it was about awareness. I had learned to pause before reaching. To ask, is this necessary, or just habit? I chose to disconnect on purpose, this time without being forced. A weekend with friends. No selfies. No life stories. Just real stories, laughter, mistakes, and silence. And in that silence, something bloomed. Trust. Intimacy. Truth. The kind of connection you can't download. I shared my story at a small seminar on tech-life balance. People laughed, nodded, and even cried. One young woman said, I thought I was the only one who felt addicted. Turns out, many of us are quietly overwhelmed. All we need is permission to step back. And someone to say, you're not alone. Presence isn't just about showing up. It's about how you show up. Eyes up. Heart open. Distraction off. Now, when I talk to someone, I try to be all there. No scrolling. No split attention. Because presence is the most generous form of love. I created a rule for myself. No phone in the first hour of waking up or the last hour before sleep. That space became sacred. A boundary between my mind and the world. Within that time, I journal. Reflect. Stretch. Just be. And it's made all the difference. I still forget. I still reach for my phone sometimes out of habit. But now I catch myself. I forgive myself. I come back. Progress isn't perfection. It's awareness. And that awareness is a compass I now trust. A friend asked me, what did you really learn from all this? I said, that everything I thought I needed, connection, entertainment, validation, was already inside me. He smiled and said, "You sound more grounded." And for the first time in a long time, I felt it too. The moral of the story: sometimes, the best way to find yourself is to put the world on silent and listen. You don't have to throw your phone away. Just remember, your attention is the most valuable thing you own. Spend it wisely.